Hello, welcome back to another video. Yeah, Gamer with Taste here, and guess what we're discussing today? Guess what we're discussing right now? Right now, we're going to be discussing the existence of a God. So, I grew up Christian, and I didn't like it. I didn't like growing up Christian because my parents would drag me off to church and my church was a small church in a small town filled with old people, and there were no attractive girls there, and I was like, there was like no point in me going. I felt like there like I don't want to go. I don't want to go. All right, as simple as that. There was nothing social to be had at church. It was just a whole bunch of old people that I didn't really care to have anything to do with. I sat in an old wooden pew that just hurt my ass, right? So, I don't know. The message didn't really speak to me all that much. Sometimes, granted, going to church did spark some mental ingenuity in my head because, to be quite frank, whenever I went to church, a lot of times I would argue with what I was hearing inside my head. So I did build a lot of philosophical ingenuity when it comes to argumentation, I would say. And it was all because of church, but I didn't like going to church. It was all because I didn't want to be there. So mentally, I would fight it. And that was the only way I could stimulate myself throughout the whole hour or hour and a half, 2 hours. I think 2 hours, because I would also go to Sunday school. I think that lasted an hour. So yeah, the only real way that I could really mentally stimulate myself was to argue with it. And that was how I got through it. So I went through a phase of my life where I ended up deciding, you know what? No, I'm atheist now. I'm atheist. And, like I hit like, what, 16? And I just decided, no, I'm atheist. I'm not going to church. I'm old enough now, mom and dad. I'm not going to church. I'm sorry. I'm 16. You trust me to drive a car. You can trust me not to go to church, right? And it took me, it took my parents a while to be able to, like, they knew I never wanted to go to church, but it took them a while to actually allow me not to go to church. But by the time I decided, no, I'm atheist, I don't want to go, they allowed me not to go, which was actually probably like the best decision they could have possibly made. I'm happy that they allowed me not to go to church. Um, but I went back to Christianity. I watched a lot of videos by the Armored Skeptic. Excuse me. I gotta pronounce words. I watched a lot of videos by the Armored Skeptic, and that's how I decided that I was atheist. Is I agreed with everything he said, and to be honest, I think I always kind of knew that I wouldn't be arguing with this stuff and asking difficult questions that would piss off the Christians if I wasn't atheist somehow, right? But the kicker is that I did kind of return back to Christianity, and I wanted to go over with like a little. I have a little bit of an aid now. I'm waving around this marker. Got myself a little tiny whiteboard, so I'm pulling a Wendigoon on you guys, and have some of my ideas written down. Hopefully, the video will be a little bit shorter thanks to it. Um, but yeah, wanted to explain to you guys why God doesn't exist, and also why it doesn't matter. So let's get into it. But before we do, we're going to have to switch. So, why doesn't God exist? First thing that I would like to point out is omnipotence. Omnipotence is the true, thing that we're discussing. We're discussing omnipotence when we're talking about why does not God not exist. And let's clarify, we're talking about the Christian God. I don't know other gods very well. The thing is like pantheons, like the Greek pantheon. I don't believe in pantheons because, you can be God of the sea, but if you're God of the sea, you're not a god. You're a superhero, okay? That's what you are, all right? That's how I look at you. You're a superhero. And guess what, bro? I don't believe in superheroes. So, no pantheons. And if you don't have power over everything, if you are not omnipotent, guess what? I don't believe in you because now you're just a superhero. You have a weakness. If you are not omnipotent, my brain thinks you have a weakness. Maybe that's not necessarily true, but that's kind of how my brain works. If you're not omnipotent, if you don't have power, unlimited power, then there's something you don't have power over. And if there's something you don't have power over, then it could potentially be used in a way to thwart you. Now, maybe you don't have power over dust mites. I don't know how that would be used to thwart you, but I mean, hey man, there could be a way. I don't know. I don't know. I don't care. This is the way my brain works. I don't really need a reason in my head. I don't know why. Whatever. You're going to have to roll with it. But we are discussing omnipotence. Now, what does omnipotence mean? So we have omnipotence. To me, omnipotence means you are all powerful, right? All powerful, which means you can do literally anything. You can do literally anything. Anything at all, okay? So why does that mean God doesn't exist? Well, you can stop existing. Sure, that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't exist, all right? So, kind of the caveat with this step. You are omnipotent, so you can stop existing. But that doesn't mean that you don't exist. That means that at any given moment, whenever you say, I believe in an omnipotent God, you are also admitting that you do not know for certain if in this moment, or any other moment for that matter, your God actually exists. You are conceding to the point that because you are believing in an omnipotent God, you are conceding to the point that he could not exist. You are giving him that power, right? We can go over arguments later, I suppose. There are arguments to be had with a few of these steps, but we'll get to that later. I think it'd be better to save it for later. So, at worst, you're really admitting I don't know if God exists because I believe that an omnipotent God exists, right? So let's go back to the whiteboard. So then when we say that an omnipotent God can then therefore stop existing, we have that an omnipotent God existing is equivalent to saying an omnipotent God could not exist. Right? Right? We kind of already just went over that. I guess I don't need to explain that any further. So, here's the reason why it doesn't matter. An omnipotent God that does not exist can exist. Now, this part can be a little confusing. An omnipotent God that does not exist can exist. Well, if he doesn't exist, then how can he exist? Well, he wouldn't be an omnipotent God if he wasn't omnipotent. Even if he doesn't exist, he is still omnipotent. We gave him that power. This whole assumption is about this God, existent or not, being omnipotent, right? That's what this whole thing is. Can an omnipotent God make a boulder that he cannot lift? I say yes. Yes, he can. And then he can lift it. He can make a boulder that he cannot lift, and then he can go ahead and lift it. You might think, well, how can that be possible? Well, I mean, okay, so let's say God has infinite power. So he has enough power to make an object that exceeds his power. But he also has so much power that he can give himself the power to lift something that exceeds his power. It's stupid. I know. I know how stupid it is. It doesn't have to be smart. Okay? So that's what it is. So let's say he does not exist, but he is still omnipotent. So he can therefore exist. All right? Now, a lot of people will understand that this kind of implies an omnipotent God can be a contradiction. And some people can't get over that fact. Some people are like, well, you're saying God can be a contradiction. You're saying God can contradict himself. There is no issue with God contradicting himself. Think about it. Think about what God is. God is, to think of biblical examples of God contradicting himself. I don't know, like flooding the whole world, the whole earth. God flooding the whole earth and therefore killing everyone and everything except for a select few amount of people. You know, one family and their wives and a couple hundred animals, a couple thousand animals, few dozen thousand animals. But other than a few dozen thousand animals and a handful of humans, a dozen humans maybe, he kills everyone. And then he goes and he gives the 10 Commandments and he says, "Thou shalt not kill." Contradiction? I mean, here's the thing. Atheists will stop at the fact that, oh, well, God existing is equivalent to God not existing, right? If you believe in an omnipotent God existing, that is equivalent to believing in an omnipotent God not existing, right? But that's true, but you also have to admit, as an atheist, believing that an omnipotent God does not exist would have to be equivalent to an omnipotent God existing, right? Believing that an omnipotent God doesn't exist would have to be equal to believing an omnipotent God does exist. So, I mean, you haven't proved atheism either, right? It's this middle ground. Neither atheism nor theism really wins in this scenario. They are equivalent. And that's not really an issue, but atheists would look at the contradiction. If you are mathematically inclined enough to know there are mathematical proofs that will assume one thing, and they will work with that one thing long enough to come up with a contradictory thing. So if you assume 0 divided by 0 is equal to 1, you can work with the fact that 0 divided by 0 is equal to 1 to show that 0 divided by 0 is also equal to 3. So which is it? Is 0 divided by 0 equal to 1 or is it equal to 3? That's a contradiction. The fact that we arrive at a contradiction by assuming that 0 divided by 0 is equal to 1 proves that 0 divided by 0 cannot equal 1, right? So the whole idea is that as soon as we get to um this part, as soon as we get to omnipotent God exists is equal to omnipotent God not exists, could not exist. As soon as we get to that, a lot of atheists will just stop and just say, well, atheism. You know, we assumed God existed and we ended up with God not existing. Atheism proven. But the thing is that you said God was atheist. Or, I'm an idiot. You said God was atheist. As the I do believe that if God exists, he may very well want you to be atheist. But that's different. Okay? That's a different topic, I suppose. That's a philosophical thing that I've come up with. What I meant to say is that even though God does not exist, he only does not exist because he is omnipotent. He is still omnipotent, even if he doesn't exist. So what does that mean? That means he could bring himself into existence, which is an interesting idea. Like, even if an omnipotent being doesn't exist, this being is still described as being omnipotent, so it should have the power to bring itself into existence, right? It's kind of a weird thing. I'm sure plenty of people would be like, well, you have to exist in order to exert your omnipotence. But, I mean, that would imply that you're not omnipotent because you would have to rely on existence in order to exert your power. So you have no power over your form, over your existence, which means you're not actually omnipotent. It's a weird concept. It's a bit of a contradiction. But that's the thing. God can be a contradiction, and you have to allow that. So, atheists, you cannot actually disprove the existence of an omnipotent God by finding ways in which he contradicted himself. It's not possible. Just because God contradicted himself morally or existentially doesn't mean he doesn't exist. A lot of people have looked at this sort of outlook that I propose, and they say, well, it sounds like you're agnostic. It sounds like you're proposing some sort of argument for agnosticism. Not really. Because where did we end? Where did we start? We started with assuming that an omnipotent God exists. Where did we end up? Well, at first we ended up with an omnipotent God doesn't exist. But saying an omnipotent God doesn't exist is really allowing for the fact that an omnipotent God can exist because he's omnipotent. So no matter what, I suppose you're kind of believing in omnipotence, but then you got to ask yourself, do I believe in omnipotence? Do I think there is actually a thing out there that is omnipotent? Do I believe in omnipotence? Even like whether or not it's a god, it could be an omnipotent box. It could be an omnipotent pube. It doesn't matter. If it's omnipotent, it might as well be God. So what do you believe? Do you believe that there's omnipotence out there? I suppose I could just end the video here. At that point, it's a question of what you believe, right? I think that's an important thing to point out. When it comes to any religion, when it comes to believing in any God, it's what you believe. It's not supposed to be about proving anything. It's not supposed to be about anything actually being real. It's about a belief. And I don't think Christians are really worried about proving the existence of God. Maybe a few are. Maybe a few are concerned about that, feel like it's possible, think it's important. But overall, I think, a belief is a belief. You can believe the world's flat. Doesn't mean the world is flat. But if you believe it hard enough, then what difference does it make? Because you are then that person. You are the person who believes the world is flat. If you believe it hard enough, it's not that it becomes true, but you become the person so, sold that it's true, that even if it's false, what effect does it have on you, right? Does it really mean anything to you if you're wrong? That's another argument brought up by Christians is, well, I mean, if we're wrong, then what have we lost? Nothing. If you're wrong, atheist, then what have you lost? Well, you go to hell. You lose a whole eternity in heaven and then some. And I don't know. Believing in hell is another thing. And just because you believe in a God that is omnipotent, that doesn't necessarily mean that you believe he's a good God. Believing that your omnipotent God is good is a little bit harder. I could make another video on that, but I think this one's getting a little bit too long already. So I think I'm going to try to wrap it up. But yeah, I don't know. What more do I add? That's basically the whole argument. I'll let you look at the whiteboard a little bit longer. Omnipotence, all powerful, means you can do literally anything. Now, this is what I wanted to go over, actually. I wanted to go over this before. So, Christians will tell me every once in a while that being all powerful doesn't mean you can do literally anything. I mean, God has a character about him. That's part of it, is like, oh, well, God has a character. And so, like, there's certain things that he can't do. He can't sin because he has a character. That means that he would never sin. I would like to point out something in particular. Being omnipotent means you can do anything. Saying you can do anything and saying that you will or would do anything, the question of if you can and if you would are two different questions. Two completely different questions. Just because you can doesn't mean that you need to. Just because you can doesn't mean that you would. Just because you can doesn't mean that you want to. But I'm saying that you can. That's it. I'm not saying that you would. I'm not saying God would do anything. I'm just saying he can. And the thing is that God is ultimately such a mysterious being to assume that you know what he would and wouldn't do as a human. It's almost blasphemous to me to think about. Like, you as a human, you claim to know God so well that you dictate what he would do. You know what God would do. You know that God would never kill an innocent person. It's like, do you know God that well? Do you really understand God well enough to really say that with absolute certainty? Like, you can believe God is good. You can believe whatever the hell you want. But to say that you know that God would never do anything, all you really know with 100% certainty, if you believe he's omnipotent, is that he can do anything. To say that, he wouldn't do certain things, that's a belief. That's not a knowledge. And to be completely honest, omnipotence is also a belief. It's not really a knowledge either. But then again, what are you going to believe in? Are you going to believe in a superhero? Are you going to believe that God can do literally everything except save your soul from eternal damnation? Are you going to believe that God can do everything except, I don't know, flood the whole earth? Kill an innocent person? Make you shit your pants on command? Do you think God could beat Elden Ring without moving his character a single step? I don't know. Like, I mean, what do you think God can't do? Uh, whatever. I think I've made my point. I'll let you look at the whiteboard just a little bit longer. Here's the whiteboard. This is kind of the way I look at things. And, there's certain arguments that you could make. I would like to hear any arguments that any of you may have about any of this. That doesn't mean that I'm going to say that you're right. That doesn't mean that I'm going to acknowledge you as valid. But you can, I would like to hear whatever anyone has to say. And yeah, I'm invested in this topic. I like discussing beliefs, theistic beliefs and atheistic beliefs. I'm very ignorant on a lot of theistic beliefs that are not Christian. So there are certain things. I do know a little bit of Eastern religion, and a lot of those just straight up don't really have a God at all. And they're a lot more about teaching rather than worshiping, per se. So I know a little bit about Eastern religion, but I'm willing to recognize a lot of my ignorance along the way as well. But yeah, this is just kind of my thoughts on the whole matter. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a good one. Hope you continue having good ones. And I hope to catch you on the next video, whatever that happens to be. I have no idea. I don't know when that will be. Whenever I decide to make one, whenever I decide to post one, it's in God's hands, I guess. Whenever he chooses. I don't know. But yeah. Stay tasty. I'll catch you later. Take care.